you guys done? Are you guys done?
Is that how you're opening?
Okay. Well, as you can see, I am with two of our keynote speakers, Jesse Cole and David Burkus. So happy to have them here. I've been following you for a long time, both of you, stalking you, quite honestly. Yes, a little bit weird, but I do love both of your work. And as we were talking in the hallway the other day, a story came up that kind of made me think of our industry, the print industry, and a problem that they're having, and one that you sort of solved, maybe indirectly, Jesse. And that was you said you have like 1,000 people waiting to be employed by you. And I thought that kind of collides with your expertise, which is about building great teams and employee retention. So I kind of wanted to find out, like, how does somebody in our industry, how do you think somebody in our industry, in the print industry, which is, staid, probably has a misconception of being old, how can they get to where you are?
Well, at first, no one wanted to work for us. Let's be very clear. No one was buying tickets for the Savannah Bananas, and no one wanted to work for us. And it was very hard to attract even players to want to play for us. But then we started screaming from atop of the mountaintops on who we are and what we stand for. And over again, sharing over, this is what we stand for. And we answered a question I think a lot of companies can't answer, and that is, what makes you different? I think a lot of companies, they talk about being a little faster, a little better, all the ers, but how can you be the only in your industry? And so we started being very bullish on saying what makes us different. It's on our website. And this started to attract people. We even, when we're trying to hire someone, we do ads or posts that say, do not apply for this job. And we actually write all the reasons you should not work for us. If you want to attract the people to work for you, you got to be very clear on who should not be a part of your team. So we started being very clear on that. And yeah, I was told a couple of years ago, we said, well, what if we had a wait list for people to work for us, because we've built such a wait list for people to buy tickets? And our Fans First director told me that we passed over 1,000. But we're very intentional. You have to do a Fans First essay to be a part of us. You even have to do a process to join the wait list. And so we try to deter people, but sometimes by trying to deter people, you attract people even better.
Okay. Do you think that's a blueprint you can create for other companies?
Tell lots of people why they shouldn't work for you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things I've always admired about Jesse and the Savannah. I mean, just what you said. Our Fans First director told me we had 1,000 person. Most companies don't have a Fans First, right? We have customer service, right? That's the best we could get to. What I've always admired about the Bananas is they truly know who they're playing for, which is fans. I mean, when I first met Jesse maybe 5 years ago, and we had this whole conversation about how baseball is boring and kids don't want to play baseball. I have a 10-year-old and 8-year-old. The last thing I want to do is have them come home to, Dad, I want to try baseball. Like, no, you cannot. You can do soccer, you can do basketball, you can do football, you cannot do baseball. I will not spend the weekend sitting in like some camp chair behind a dugout for the whole weekend for a super boring game. But I don't live anywhere near Savannah, right? And what happens with Jesse and with the fans there is that they're providing a different experience. The kids watch it, they actually enjoy this game of baseball. They want to, in my opinion, they're single-handedly saving the game of baseball, because if more people like me exist, then 10-year-olds don't play baseball, they don't become high school players and college players, and then we have no Major League Baseball, right? And they know that, and that's at the core of what they do, of trying to create that experience for the fans, to do it for multiple different reasons. And that's the thing I think is lacking, honestly, from a lot of organizations, is I label it pro-social purpose, after there's a whole body of research around what's called pro-social motivation, the motivation to do something because you know it makes a meaningful impact on somebody, right? Most of us want that. And most of us, in a lot of your more traditional industries, we don't do a good enough job sharing, not this is what we do and how we do it a little bit better and all of the ers, et cetera, but this is who we do it for. This is who is served by the work that we do. People want to do that work that matters, and they've never shied away from being able to tell those stories. And when you work for them, you know exactly, and you get the opportunity to go do it, to go create your own crazy service story, your own crazy Fans First story. Why wouldn't you want to come do that?
Chris, I'll jump on that for a little bit. You know, most companies, they have values. So in the printing industry, whatever industry, you have values, but you have stories that back those up. And I think that's what gets people inspired to want to be a part of something. Everyone can say integrity, honesty, all the words that are just words. But you have stories to back those up, and how often are you sharing those stories? So for instance, we built a Fans First playbook. It's built of those stories. And we challenge our team every game, every day. What are those fans first moments you can create? What are those stories you can create? And then those stories get shared. The word integrity is not going to get shared, but a story about something you did that was special will get shared, and that's what attracts people.
Now, do you think people are afraid to share those stories? Like, what keeps people from doing this?
I don't think we've given them permission. So one of the other companies I'm fascinated with is a couple years ago, under the leadership of Bruce Val, KPMG, the accounting firm, their U.S. operation, sought to tell stories, right? And in essence, I mean, it's accounting, right? It's just as boring and just as old as printing, right? A little bit older, right? But around Gutenberg Press and double entry bookkeeping around the same time, right? And what KPMG sought to do is they sought to tell stories. First, they told stories from their past, right? Like the Fans First playbook, to say, here's what we were a part of. Did you know that we were involved in the Lend-Lease Act, which is essentially how the U.S. entered World War II? Did you know that KPMG certified the election of Nelson Mandela? Did you know that we were involved in the recovery efforts and the insurance contracts around 9/11 recovery, right? So they told all of those stories for 6 or 9 months, and then they said, okay, you tell us your story. And they launched a whole way that you could say, here's what I do through the lens of who I help, and tell it as a story that they would also promote. They created a whole internal social element to it. They gave their people permission, right? So they gave them the template of how to tell the story, but then they just gave their people permission to do it. And then they championed kind of the best ones and circulated them around.
So it came from the top.
I mean, it was to give them permission, for sure. I don't think it has to come from the top. One thing I think is interesting about KPMG, their annual engagement survey, the year after they did this initiative, they snuck a question in there that was, how often does your manager talk about purpose at KPMG? And you could see a 30% difference in engagement between people who said, yeah, my manager talks about this versus doesn't, right? So it's a top-down effort, but that team orientation still matters. So even if you're not in that leadership role, you're not the company owner, and you're just going, what can I do with my team and the people I'm responsible with? You could still give them permission to tell stories.
Now, going back to how you got to where you were, like, what gave you the courage to first start doing things differently? So that the nugget that started the whole culture that kind of snowballed into what it is now.
We had no other options.
Desperation.
No, I think constraints foster creativity. How do you look at the constraints and challenges? And obviously with what happened with COVID, some companies flourished because they saw that as a huge opportunity to do something different. For us, before even Savannah Bananas, I started in Gastonia as a 23-year-old GM. And the only time someone gets a job as a GM at 23, it has to be the worst team in the country. And it was the worst team in the country. There was $268 in the bank account. My first day, there was 200 fans coming to the games. I couldn't pay myself the first 3 months. There was no money in the bank account. So what I realized is we had to start trying things, testing things, doing things. So it was that forced constraint of having no other options that we started doing things that we've never done before. And then how do you learn? You learn by doing. Herb Kelleher was asked 5 years into Southwest Airlines by a reporter, he said, what's your business strategy? And he said, it's called doing things. And it's a very simple thing, but we talk. We learn more by doing. So because we had no other options in the beginning in Gastonia, and then 10 plus years later, I had no options in Savannah as we only sold 2 tickets and we were down to our last dollar and we overdrafted our account, we had to go dramatically different. And because we went through that, we learned quickly how our fans responded. And they don't respond to the same normal things everyone else was doing. They responded to what's unique, what's memorable, what's different. And then to go back on purpose, that was everything. Our people started having purpose, that they're a part of something special. And when you go home and someone asks you, how was your day at work? Fine. There's something wrong there. And most people will say it's fine. You have to give them something to be proud of. And that's what we try to focus on every day. What are we doing that we're proud of? That our people can go home at Thanksgiving and they're the one talking the whole dinner because they have so many cool things they're doing.
Interesting. Now, for our industry, which many are still doing well, but things haven't changed in a long time, but there's some constraints, but some of them are doing good enough. What can you do to light a fire?
Well, I wouldn't say there are no constraints, right? We're here talking about a big constraint, which is talent, right? One of the things I've been researching a lot, again, to kind of underscore this purpose idea, is this so-called Great Resignation, right? And we started talking about it so shortly after the pandemic. People aren't going to come back to work. They're not going to. Turns out and I find this mind-boggling. But it turns out the only place that's actually seeing real numbers of a great resignation so far is the service industry, which is ironic because we just spent the last, 10 minutes talking about serving people, right? But it's not the service industry, it's the jobs where people don't serve, right? We're recording this in a hotel, right? The number one struggle that hotels are having with hospitality is room service and housekeeping. Why? You don't ever interact with the customer. You have no idea who you serve and how you serve. And then I think in the other, it's standardization. It's fast food. It's this and that. It's giving people, not just telling people the purpose, but letting them act in their own autonomy to serve that purpose. What's brilliant about what Jesse did out of desperation was he can't say, it's not Jesse's master plan, right? It's a whole team coming up with ideas. It's people going, hey, if you've got that opportunity to go do it, go do something that makes the fans a great day, whether it's the family of 7 you talked about in the keynote today, or it's the intern walking the man home, right? So what can you do to light a fire? Okay, we talked about telling stories, but the next thing is not just giving people permission to tell it, but giving them the autonomy they need to play around with certain things. Let them negotiate deals a little bit more, or let them think through how we're gonna actually manage the logistics of this print run, et cetera, just to give them that little bit more autonomy that makes them feel that sense of ownership. There's a whole wealth of research around the power of autonomy for lighting that fire, which is the term that you used. And when that autonomous actions are done in the service of, I know who I'm doing this for, it's like, I don't know, it's like square rooting, or not square rooting it, squaring it, right? Timesing it by itself, compounding it.
There you
It's
go.
like compounding it.
Well, to jump on that, like what gets recognized gets done. And so if you're looking at most companies, what gets recognized? Hitting sales goals, revenues, profits, meetings, all this quota to hit a number. But how often you get recognized for creating these amazing moments for your customers and your clients? So it's very important to us, like that is what we celebrate at the end of the night. I, as the owner of the company, have no idea what the money is in our bank account. I don't have meetings about sales and revenue. I have meetings on how to create fans. So to give you an example, 1% of our total top line budget goes to surprise and delight of our team. So if you're a $10 million company, $100,000 is surprise and delight for our team. And so we build these stories to recognize our team for special things. So when Danny, our vice president, helped raise $133,000 for nonprofits, at the end of the season, we knew the one bond that he had with his dad was Cleveland Indians baseball. And he watched the World Series back in '97 when he was a kid with his dad. And when the Indians made the World Series in 2016 to play the Cubs, we got tickets, my wife Emily championed this, got tickets to game 1 of the World Series. And we called his dad started crying. And then we brought Danny in with the whole team. We said, Danny, I got a gift for you. We gave him a toy airplane. And it said, in the toy airplane, and I said, Danny, this represents how far you've gone with us, how far you're going, and how you've taken everyone with you. And he goes, oh, cool, thanks, man. I go, one more thing, Danny. Also, we're flying you tomorrow. You're going to game 1 of the World Series. You're going with your dad. And he said, shut up. We actually are filming. He goes, shut up. I go, no, that's not the response we were expecting. He didn't believe it. And he called his dad. They both got emotional. They were the first people in line for game 1 of the World Series. Did that cost thousands of dollars? You better believe it. Was it worth it? 1,000%. Because you created a moment for them that really matters. I'll never forget that. So my question is, are they having conversations on how they do those things for their team and their clients? Or are they having more conversations on how do we drive revenue and sales?
Yeah, there's a line I use often that people want to do work that matters, which is the first part of what we've all talked about, but they want to work for leaders who tell them they matter, right? And so even if you're not in a customer-facing role, et cetera, that still takes leaders who are willing to point out, you tried this thing a little bit differently 3 weeks ago, and it turned out, and we learned from that. Just saying thank you is enough, which we don't do often enough. Of those learning moments, those little micro improvements, et cetera, that we do expressing thank you, but then how can you plus it by adding out on top of that, I think is a brilliant idea, right? We want to work for people who actually tell us what we do matters. And that's why, again, these really rote fast food and other kind of, it's the service industry and they made it robotic and now they're the ones struggling with the Great Resignation. Why? Because their people don't have any freedom to express themselves. And then when they do stumble in using that autonomy, stumble into better ways to do things, they either get yelled at for going off script, right? Or nobody really notices, or they get a little pat on the back, and somebody's saying, "Wow, this is how far you've taken us," right?
We're learning. You learn by testing and trying things. I think often leaders are afraid to test and try, to put that 1% on the budget to take care of your people. It's once you start trying and you realize that's where you learn everything. And so we're bullish on experimenting for our people, for our fans. And so I think a lot of people get inspired and say, "Oh, that's a good idea. We just can't do that." Have you tried? Have you experimented? So I think that's where it starts. And we were forced to experiment pretty fast with the bananas. And we'll never stop. And our team knows that. That's in our culture now.
I also just love the way he says experiment. instead of experiment.
Am I saying it wrong?
No, it's the other way to say it. It's just
Yeah.
it makes me want some gum, really, is what it does.
I'll work on that.
I'm sure it's the right way. I'm sure. Look, I'm an American. We don't speak English well at all,
Yeah,
right?
I have no idea.
They don't even call it American. They call it English. It's not even ours. So that's how bad we are at it most of the time.
We
So
test
you're probably,
things. Yeah, we
you're
test
probably
things.
closer, right, to it.
I'm amazed we've made it this long.
Yes. This really went off the rails.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well done.
No.
This was phenomenal. Thank you
Thank
both.
you. It's fun.